Every unit also has a grammar skill that is helpful when you are speaking. But of course, your grammar skills can be helpful in reading and writing and listening as well. Unit 1's grammar skill has to do with auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are like what you might call helping verbs. And in this unit, the helping verbs we're going to work with are do, be, and have. The auxiliary verbs do, be, and have are used to make questions and negative statements. So how do we do that? Well, we do it in a lot of different verb tenses. For example, we use do as a helping or auxiliary verb with the simple present tense and the simple past tense. In the simple present tense, we use do to make questions. Does he like pizza? We also use it to make negatives. He doesn't like pizza. Notice the word order for a yes-no question. We put the helping verb do or does before the subject, then the main verb, and the rest of the question. Notice that we've used does here because the subject is he, and he, she, or it use does. In the negative, we also have used does with does not, which has been contracted to doesn't. Again, we use doesn't because the subject is he. If it were he, she, or it in the subject, we would always use doesn't. So simple present tense uses do to make yes-no questions and negatives. Simple past tense also uses do to make questions and negative statements. The do here becomes did, and that's how we know that we're in past tense. Did they bring their books? Notice again we have the do or the do auxiliary. Here it's did before the subject and then the main verb. Did they, subject, main verb, bring their books? We also use do in simple past to make negative statements. They didn't bring their books. They didn't bring their books. So we use do with simple present and simple past when making questions and negative statements. So when do we use be? Well, we use be to make questions and negative statements with the present and past continuous verb tense. Now, the continuous verb tense always has an ing with it and a verb to be. So the continuous tense looks like this. Are you reading? Notice we took the auxiliary verb be because we know that there are different forms of be, and they are is, am, are in the present tense, and was, and were in the past tense. Okay, so now that we know about the different forms of be, we can take a look at how be is used as a helping verb in forming questions and negatives. Are you reading? We put the be helping verb or auxiliary verb in front of the subject you, and remember, we always have an ing with the continuous tense. Are you reading? And we can make the negative by adding not after are. We are not or we aren't reading now. And we know these are present continuous tenses because we have the verb to be and we have ing. Now past continuous works the same way, except instead of using are, we're going to use was to tell us we're in past tense. So was Mr. Knight teaching here last year? Again, remember, we have to have that ing for it to be a continuous tense. Was is your auxiliary be plus the subject, Mr. Knight, plus your ing form. And we can use was to make the negative in past continuous. He was not or wasn't teaching here last year. Again, we must have the verb to be plus an ing verb for a continuous tense. So that's do and be. And the last auxiliary we need to talk about is have. So we use have when we are forming questions or negative statements in the present perfect tense. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but present perfect tense must have some form of have or has plus the past participle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So let's look at present perfect using the auxiliary have. Again, for questions, we put the auxiliary verb at the beginning, has. We have a subject here, she, and a past participle, left, yet. Again, we're using has because our subject here is she, and we know that he, she, and it have to use has. And we can make it negative, Nancy has not or hasn't left yet. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of how we use do, be, and have to make questions and negative statements. So we're going to go on to the next slide and talk a little bit more in detail about each of these. Okay, let's look at each of these verb tenses and their use of auxiliary verbs a little more closely. So we know that auxiliary verbs are used to make negative statements and questions. So we also learned that do is the auxiliary verb that we need to make a negative statement or question in simple present and simple past verb tense. Simple present, simple past uses do. So here's some more examples. Does Hafasa like pizza? She doesn't like pizza. Again, remember, we use does if our subject is a he, she, or it. If it's you or I or they, then we just use do. Because I could say, do you like pizza? And here I've used do because my subject is you and not a he, she, or it. Okay, so let's take a look also at the simple past tense. Did Hans drive today? We put did in front of the subject Hans because the did is the do in past tense, and we can use it to make the negative. No, he didn't drive. Okay, so do, simple present, simple past, negatives, and questions. All right, let's go on. Okay, it's your turn. Let's try it. What do we use the auxiliary verbs do, have, and be for? Okay, you're right if you said that we use them to make questions and negative statements. All right, so what verb tenses do we use do to make negative statements and questions? Do. Which verb tense? You're right if you guessed simple present and simple past. Okay, so now's your turn. Make a simple present negative statement. Can you think of one? We need do. We need not. Make a simple present yes/no question. Okay, again, we need do or does, depending on our subject, and we need to make sure we put the do or does at the beginning of the question, and then the subject, and then the main verb. Okay, how about a simple past negative statement? Now, we're not going to use do here. What are we going to use? Absolutely, we need did, and since we're talking about a negative statement, we need not. And finally, make a simple past yes/no question. What will you start with here? Yes. Did plus your subject plus your main verb and the rest of your question. Okay, I hope you were able to do these. Okay, here's a little more practice using be as an auxiliary verb. Remember that be in the present tense is am, is, are, and in the past tense was and were. So what is the verb tense that we use be with to make negative statements and questions? That's right, present and past continuous. And what do we need to make a continuous verb tense? We must have a form of the verb to be plus a verb that ends in what? That's it, ing. So, here's an example of present continuous. Is Jerry reading? Here we have is at the beginning, and we have our subject Jerry, and look, we have our verb with ing. And for our negative statement, he isn't reading now. All right, now these are present tense because we're using is, so let's change it to past continuous and use was. Was Jenny studying? Again, we have a form of the verb to be and an ing verb. And we can make that negative. Jenny was not or wasn't studying. All right, so be we use with present and past continuous to make questions and negative statements. Okay, it's your turn now. What verb tenses do we use be to form negative statements and questions? Be, was, were, is, am, are. Okay, you guessed it right if you said that we use it for present and past, what? Yes, continuous verb tense. All right, now the continuous verb tense must have ing. Okay, so let's see. Make a present continuous negative statement. All right, so we're going to need a verb to be. We're going to need it to be in present, so it's is, am, or are. We're going to need not to make it negative. Okay. All right, let's make a present continuous yes/no question. So how will you start this one? Well, you need present form of be, so maybe are or is, and that will be at the beginning since we're making a question. And then we need our subject and a verb plus what? That's right, ing. Okay, let's try a past continuous negative statement. Now, if we're in the past verb tense, we're not going to use is, am, or are. So we're going to start with either was or were plus not to make it negative. And don't forget, you got to have that verb plus ing. All right. How about a past continuous yes/no question? Well, again, we're going to start with was or were because we're in the past and we're in a yes/no question, so we're going to begin with the auxiliary verb. Then we're going to have our subject, and then we're going to have our verb plus ing and the rest of the question. Okay, I hope you were able to come up with some good ones.